And then the students would use this space and go out and about to get their stories and their videos and their photography and pull it all together for a website we have, which is called Fashion North, which you can look at if you want to in your own time. We could do with the hits. And I'd just be in that room all day with them, hovering around, having a coffee, leaning over their shoulders, you know, giving them advice, helping type in different headlines or whatever for them. So it was really hands-on and they were getting instant feedback. And this obviously all had to change. This is how it used to work. This video is literally about 20 seconds. So I might have to rewind it, but it's on our Twitter page. It was originally done for recruitment purposes, but I'll just put it on. So that kind of gives you a flavour of how it used to be in the old world, when we could actually all get together and huddle around and do things. So how the models work post-COVID, we were under extra restrictions in the Northeast really quickly, and the room capacities were worked out, and that big hub space you just saw, we were only allowed 5 students in at a time. So it would be impossible to run Newsdays live. We could have done it on separate days, but it's not much of an experience with 5 students at a time. So I decided I would pre-record all my lectures and upload them to our VLE in advance, so the students could listen to them any day, any time. They didn't have to get up at 9 o'clock and listen to me live being a lecturer. And that would give the context. And then at 10 o'clock, we would all meet for our conference as normal, but it was on our VLE, which is called Canvas, which some of you may have, but there's a special sort of function there called conferences, handily, where I can set up a conference. And as you can see, all the students have to turn up on time. They have to have their cameras on because they don't like that. And one by one, they present their editorial ideas, what they're going to work on that day. So we're not really driven by the news agenda. They have to think of their own ideas that would be suitable for the target audience on Fashion North. And it's worked really well in that term because they'll all mute, one person will speak at a time, but the other students will chip in on the chat, sort of offering extra suggestions or constructive criticism. And then that takes about 40 minutes, 45 minutes, and then they disappear off screen and they're off working, whether they're phoning people. Some have gone out in a socially distanced, safe way to do street style or do some videos. They're working on their content throughout the day. And the hard bit for me is just sitting in my dining room and waiting. You know, they can contact me on the VLE, or they can email me saying, can we have a chat on Skype or FaceTime, so I can talk to them about any issues or problems they've got. And then we sort of end it all with a wrap up, which I'll go into. So this is the conference section of our Canvas. So they know to join the meeting on time, as in the real world, you wouldn't be late for conference, and they must have thought of lots of good ideas in advance. And then while they go off and do their ideas, I'll type up what their ideas were into one collaborative news list with all their names on, which they can all see and they can all edit and review. It's under a section called collaborations in our VLE. So it looks a bit like this. And throughout the day, they'll go in and I'll go in and update it, saying what's been published, what hasn't worked, what we need some extra content on. So everybody knows where they're at and where everybody else is at the same time. And the students are collating their words, they're writing their headlines, they're embedding video and images using WordPress, which they're very familiar with because we also used that when we had physical newsdays. So they'll do everything from putting the tags on, the home images, writing the cells, making sure the content is ready for publication. And they work in a basket called draft. And what you can't see is there's also usually a basket called pending review, which is where they send it when they're finished. It's not on there at the minute because I've been a swot and emptied it and published everything. So when something's in pending review, I know they think it's ready to be published. And that's when I'll go in, have a look at it, check it over, and publish their work, ready for them to do the next step. So once I've published their work, I'll drop them an email and say, your story about whatever, Rihanna, because she's on the screen, I've published it. And I'll give them some feedback, you know, you really need to learn how to spell glamorous, because nobody can spell glamorous. I had to change your headline because it didn't have enough SEO in it, something like that. So they're getting instant feedback, but without me leaning over their shoulder. And then the student's next job is to promote that work. So Fashion North has lots of social media platforms. They have all the passwords, and it's their job to promote their work on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We're using TikTok a lot now because that's apparently where the cool kids are. So their work is ongoing. And we have 2 interns who work in our media hub currently from home, who crunch the analytics for me for our 4 websites. We have a hyperlocal news site, we have an arts and culture site and a sports site, but obviously I mostly deal with fashion. So we get all the figures which we share with students. That's how many hits Fashion North had in October. Obviously COVID is beating us with our news site. And we get stats on which stories get the most hits, which have the longest page impressions. So we let the students know, they love the praise. We have awards. We used to have in the Media Hub, we have a wall of praise where we'll put up their work or when they get bylines. So it's kind of motivating for them to know that real people are seeing their work, and they're building a great portfolio to showcase their work to employers at the same time. Pros, unbelievably, 100% attendance, presumably because they've got nowhere else to go and they haven't been at parties the night before. They like being at home. They like not having to commute in the dark at 9 o'clock in the morning in the rain, and Sunderland's cold from about September. And they do understand that this is how real journalists are working at the moment. And so it is mimicking professional practice. They're still learning those skills. They're still practicing those skills and honing those skills and learning to work under pressure to deadline. And it's been a chance to do some more interactive tasks where they can collaborate on PowerPoints and presentations as well. On the cons, certain skills that I prefer they practice more have gone out of the window a little bit. We used to do podcasts in our studio. We had to obviously dump that, and I'm still waiting to get Kit signed off for them to do it remotely at home. So that's probably had to wait till next semester. We've had to really cut back on street style and shooting models and interviewing people in person for obvious restriction reasons. And I think it's a real problem with cohort identity. I'm really grateful I'm not doing this with stage 1, who don't really know each other yet, because at least stage 2 and 3 are already in friendship groups and they know me personally, they've met me in the real life. So they feel a lot more comfortable dealing with me and with each other online than I think the freshers would be. And the other problem we have with our VLE, unlike Zoom, is that they can't see each other in that conference. They can only see me and I can see everyone. But that's a problem with the VLE that I unfortunately can't solve, but it doesn't make for such a conference feel. But they kind of like it, you know, they're saying it's still real journalism, but obviously it's not the same as all being together, but they understand they have to be safe. They understand they're mimicking the real world and it's preparing them for graduation. And that they can still talk to each other online, whether it's on the chat or during conference, they can still hear each other. So conclusions, yes, some learning has suffered, you know, the stuff we really push our students to do, which is get out there, talk to people. A lot of it's had to be on Skype or Zoom or FaceTime, but actually you can get hold of people a lot easier because everyone's at home. I miss being able to like just walk around, have a chat, ask them how they are, walk the room, pointing over their shoulders, because if I'm giving them instant feedback, everyone else is listening, so they're learning as well. But they're enjoying it, they're turning up. The fact they listen to the lecture on another day means they don't really feel they're in an academic or educational context, so it's learning by stealth almost, that's been separated from the news day. And it is modelling what's happening in newsrooms and magazines and newspapers across the world, basically. So we're doing the best we can, really. So yeah, thank you for listening. That's it from me, really, but happy to answer any questions, and I'll stop sharing my screen so I can see everybody.
Fantastic, thank you, Carol. Really interesting and really good to be getting such good feedback. You must feel really quite heartened by that, because I think a real concern for lots of us is what is the student experience like at the moment, when it is, you know, it is in this really artificial setting. So it's really good that you're getting such positive feedback. Great, thank you. Well, why don't we wait and do questions, unless anybody's desperate to ask a question just now. Yeah, go for it.
Steve in Falmouth. I've got one for Carol. You said that they can only see you in the conference and it's because of Canvas.
Yeah.
Could you look at changing Canvas? Because I think Kevin will mention, I think it's used on the MA, but we use Teams, which seems quite restrictive. Have you looked at different software?
I would love to do it on Zoom or on Teams, but the uni's insisting we use the VLE because that will then capture attendance.
Ah, okay. Right.
So I've nearly got myself sacked by secretly using Zoom a couple of times for like guest speakers and things. It's really annoying, but it's not my call, unfortunately.
No, it's the same down here.
Yeah,
that's our big problem down here in Falmouth, is it doesn't catch attendance, and we often have to do it all ourselves, which is a bit of a nightmare in retrospect.
I think we one of the previous conferences we did have some discussion around, you know, the different platforms that people were using and what they found most user friendly and what their universities were happy for them to use. And I think that is, you know, that's a challenge that's common to most of us, actually. And I know that some colleagues have found that incredibly challenging.
It's very frustrating because we're just banned from using Zoom, even though I've bought my own account. But for guest speakers, I still use it because that's what external people want to use.
I think lots of people have that experience. Great, thank you, Carol. That was really interesting. Can we now go to Rachel from Worcester? Rachel, it's over to you.
Thank you very much. I shall just share my screen then as well, if I can hopefully do this. And we can, yeah, so I think that should be there. You should be able to see that as well. And really what here at Worcester we're doing, I am, hopefully you will notice this is my office, if you can see me, and I'm not at home. So I am doing some face-to-face, and our news days are a bit of a mix of people being in and people working remotely. And really what I was just going to talk through is how far we've come since March, obviously wanting the best experience for our students in such challenging times, ensuring we're doing what the BJTC requires us to do, and really just to talk through the process that we've gone through and how we're actually doing them, because we are doing kind of more traditional news days than Carol spoke about. So the radio, TV, and social media news days. And if I just go through what really the kind of process that we've gone through this semester, starting very much with, oh my gosh, how are we going to do this, and what have we got to do, and who's going to do what, and goodness me, what do we do? And I think the discussion, we kept students informed. Students were concerned. Students have still concerned about lots of things, and that was obviously something we needed to consider, that we knew some students weren't going to be coming back, even though our VC calls it, we are an education hotspot and a COVID cold spot. That was our aim as the university, but we knew that people weren't necessarily coming back. So we kept in touch with students, and we've also obviously wanted to know what they're comfortable with, but also what staff were comfortable with doing. When we had that, the rooms were checked to see how many people could be in, and that, and I think it was at least halved, if not more. But we wanted to check whether galleries were safe, whether people wanted to be in galleries, and that type of thing. So we had that conversation. It was also really important for us to ensure we knew what students had got at home, what equipment they got. We didn't want anyone feeling disadvantaged, and that's still something that does cause problems, because we've got remote access now to computers here at the university, but for students to be able to do that, they've got to have Microsoft 10, and they have to, it's only on PCs and it's not on Mac, so there are problems with that. So we audited our students to check what they got in terms of equipment for kind of laptops and phones as well, mainly phones that they're using, and they're using those an awful lot. So we checked that people had got what they needed. We're not talking huge numbers here. I'm looking at kind of 15 in the third year and 20 in the second year in these groups, in these news days. Everybody had a mobile phone that they could use. So we ensured that people knew that we would support them as best we could. And also I thought it was important to let them know that we're talking about this semester, that this wasn't for the whole year, that it wasn't for those in the second year, you know, for the rest of their university experience, and making it clear that we felt if they were going to be missing something or doing something in a different way, we would ensure wherever possible that learning in the more traditional way would be done in the future, so that they didn't feel, oh, I'm missing out on things. So these were kind of considerations we went through when we were setting up the Newsday kind of template for what we're doing. I'm involved in all of the Newsdays. So if I just go through what we do at the moment, so we're this semester, what are we, week 9 now? The third years are doing radio and social media news days every week. And the second years, it's their first TV news days. They don't do them in the first year, so it's their kind of first taste of TV news days. They have obviously all had the initial training and in the skills required to produce content. So that's done in the first year. But what we decided upon was this approach of having a core team in the newsroom, whether it's for radio and social media or TV, but to have people actually coming in if they can and if they want to. And we made the decision to use the radio studios because we only need one person to work that, but not the TV studio nor the gallery. So our TV news days are completely away from those. One, because galleries are never the nicest of places to be, but two, because we felt if we went into, and obviously at the beginning, in September, October, we didn't know what was coming, and if a lockdown came, whether we would be able to continue coming in. We didn't know that at that point, and we felt if they were going to be if we did use the gallery, even though it had been okayed by health and safety, then if we went into lockdown, they'd have to completely change and learn something completely different, because obviously they wouldn't be able to do that. We kind of took the decision that all kit would be Mojo, that they wouldn't have to, I mean, I'm sure everybody has this, that kit that is booked out has to then sit in a room for 3 days before it can be used again. So we just encourage the students to use their own phones, but we've obviously got Mojo kits to take out to them as well. Teaching wise, the thing that we needed to ensure, we wanted to make sure we were doing, was teaching them how to interview people online, record it, gather that material online rather than going out face to face, so that if people couldn't, for whatever reason, go out and about and weren't comfortable to, then they could still contribute to Newsdays. We use OneDrive for sharing material, so that all students, I've set up a folder for each Newsday, a shared folder, and everybody can then put their material into that, and obviously that can be accessed by everybody else working on that Newsday. And it seems to, technically there's been lots going on, but it seems to have been, I'm touching fake wood at the moment, but it seems to work at the moment. So you know, we are pleased with the way it's going. I think I'm not, you know, saying hey this is brilliant, but it's working a bit, I think. So if I just look at going for the radio, the third years at the moment, the social media and the radio Newsdays, and like Carol, we have a morning meeting. We use Teams. I've just put on those slides just because I thought it, you know, it's useful to know what we're using. We do use Teams, and we use it an awful lot, and so the conference, the morning meeting, is via Teams, and you can see just in that picture there are some students in the studio, in the newsroom, and then another student speaking, and he's at home, but they're all involved in the morning meeting, whether they're in the newsroom or they're at home. And we set off, we go round, the editors run it, and what's your ideas, and we go through that as we normally would. As far as gathering material goes, the students use Audacity to edit. We have encouraged them to download Voice Record 7 on their mobiles for the audio, and we also use Clean Feed, which seems to be really good as far as getting audio and doing interviews with people. And for anyone who doesn't know that or use that, it kind of works in a way, if you send an email or you sign up, it's free, there is a free version, but you, to your contributor, will get a link emailed to them. They don't have to have Clean Feed or anything, they just click on that link and you go into Clean Feed, and then you're recording broadcast quality phone. So it's broadcast quality. All you need is to be able to have a microphone on their device. So if it's on their phone.
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, I was just confirming, did you change the name of Rishi Sunak's story to Statements? Because I have to rename the picture.
No, I changed it to Statements earlier. I think because it needed to be clear about what it was.
Okay, it's obviously not about me that I'm.
So Statement it is, because I'll have to rename the picture.
Yeah,
Margaret,
please.
could you mute a couple for us?
I'll carry on. So we have, so they use those. Clean Feed is great for getting interviews, and the students can use that. They can use their phones for that. They can use their laptops as well. So we tend to have in the newsroom, editors tend to be there. Social media editor hasn't been there each week. They have worked remotely. Presenter is obviously there, and a couple of reporters to go out from there, but I say it's very much on a weekly basis, right? Who is coming in, who isn't, who wants to, acutely aware that not everybody is able to do all the roles at the moment, but again, we're saying if you can't this semester, hopefully you will be able to if you come in next to us. The only one that really they can't do is that picture on the right is the presenter, because obviously they are using the radio studios, so our need to be here. We've had different presenters each week, different people coming in and taking on that role, getting used to using a studio wearing blue plastic latex gloves is something else as well that they've had to get used to. You know, the PPE, we've got perspex screens in there, so we can have 2 people in that studio. We tend to just have 1 person in the studio at that time. But that way that those radio and social media news days haven't been impacted hugely. What we have done is slightly widen our audience base, if you like. So where are we gathering our stories from? For a news day, normally we would say it's all very Worcester based, it's a Worcester audience, and we've broadened that slightly to allow students to do stories that they can get content from home. But they're doing interviews, and they're producing voice pieces and raps and things and sending that material in. They aren't accessing Burley remotely. It's Burley that we use for radio. They're not able to access that remotely, but the students in the newsroom are just taking the material that's come in out of the OneDrive and putting it into Burley, and it's going into the running order that way. So it's kind of very much a team, and they seem quite happy with that. Just going through to the TV news days, and this is where we've changed completely, because I say we're not using radio, we're not using the gallery nor the studio at all. We're making huge use of Teams, and what that picture, these are the second year, so they haven't, there is the luxury, they're not being assessed on these news days, but they are, and they haven't been in the gallery nor studio before. But what you can see there is a presenter, the director and a producer on screen, and everything is being done via the power of 2 iPads and 2 laptops. And I mean, I've been blown away by how this has changed and how we've been able to operate. I'd like to say, yes, I've had lots to do with it. Obviously editorial I have, but the technical team, our technician getting this sorted and enabling this, it just wouldn't happen without that. So we use bear with me. I'm unmuted again. So we have basically using Teams, again, the editorial meeting, exactly the same as we do with the radio news days, but then Teams is also used for our presenters and to bring in those feeds into OBS to then for it to be broadcast out. So the laptop you can see in that picture with the girl with the netball on her back is acting as director, and everything's coming in there into there and playing out. Not just we have a presenter, she's got the presenter in front of her reading auto cue. They can also see the other through Teams, see picture in picture of this, that and the other, and the auto cue and output and the next VT as well. And it's all coming together just like it would do in a gallery. We use Teleprompter Pro that you can see there on the left for the scripts. So they're not using a rundown creator of any sort in that way. It is done in kind of Word and then put into the teleprompter. That's the one kind of thing that they're not doing, but it's all done and it's working really well. They are engaged in it, and we've had, I think that week there were 4 of them just in the newsroom. That was all. Everybody else was working remotely and sending material in. If I think, oh, can I go to that one? Yes, now that is just another image of another news day, and this one I've just got a little clip of, but just to tell you here. So that's Helmi was the director, and she was kind of playing everything out. She has got the technical support. Our technician is behind her, so showing her what to do. She's operating the auto cue as well. On the right hand laptop, you can see Amir in a screen. He was presenter, and he's actually in Finland, presenting from in his kitchen in Finland. And our sport presenter was the other side of that MATLAB, and she was on another screen. And then our reporters were all remote and had sent material in, edited it themselves, sent it in, and their packages were played out, their oaths were played out, and it was all done. And we kind of had a 10-minute bulletin, all done, I say, with kind of two laptops and 2 iPads. If I just, hopefully this will just, this is just a minute, it's not long, it's just a minute of that actual process, I think, if I can press play there.
Hello and welcome to U-News. I'm Amir Farhad with a bulletin news from students at the University of Worcester.
U-News, University of Worcester.
Now over to Molly for some sports news.
Thanks, Amir. Worcester Wolves basketball team recorded their first win of the season in a 1-point victory against Surrey Scorchers. It was the Wolves' first competitive fixture of the year, and they came out strong in the first quarter.
So just a little video to show the process rather than the output. We did have, you know, I said some students went out and gathered material. Some students had recorded, did interviews online and don't have to go out if they don't want to. I think that's something we really don't, we're not putting them in positions where we're making them do things that they're uncomfortable with. I think at the moment it wouldn't work, and we just don't want to do that. There's no need for them to do that. Oh no, you don't want to see that again, do you? So just going through really how because obviously we're week 9, as I say, it's new, but it does seem to be working. I think looking at what we've learned and what's working well and what's not working so well, something I wasn't expecting but noticed at the start was that actually I think because students had since March been working on their own and working remotely, teamwork wasn't something that was at the forefront of their thinking, and when they were actually put back together and working together, it was something that they had to rediscover a bit, and we had to encourage more. And they were a little more self-centered than they would have been previously. They're back through it now, but it was something that you know, we had to work with. Remote working doesn't suit everybody. Some people are in, week out, because they want to be in and want to be in the with people. Some people, I guess, are less, that they're working, they're showing them, they're doing some, but probably not as much as they would be doing if they were coming in, and they're quite happy with that. I've mentioned that not all students can try everything. Not everybody can, obviously, unless they can be here, can be presenter for radio, for example, or that director role. I should say, if we had to go completely remote, then our technician would take on that director role, and those TV news days would still run exactly as they do, but just with him pressing those buttons. Feedback wise, similar to Carol, really what I really miss is going around the room and feeding back as people are working, and you're obviously not able to do that. I'm seeing material once it's been sent in, and by that point it's too late to change anything and to discuss, so that feedback is happening far more after the event than during it. Impact of that, I don't know yet whether there's going to be a huge impact, but we're having to ensure that they do read, watch, listen to feedback and talk to us, because we can't do it through the process, through the actual day. I've mentioned without the technical support, it just wouldn't happen. So they've been, you know, our technician is hugely enthusiastic, and that really does help here. I'm aware that some things, because particularly with the TV side of things, the going out and interviewing people face to face and shooting sequences and shooting those lovely packages isn't happening at the moment. They're learning a whole range of different things, but that's not. But I'm not saying they won't, and hopefully next semester we'll be able to change. And they know how to shoot sequences, but they learnt it in the first year, and we all know that, you know, they need to keep practicing, and they do tend to forget things. So it's something that we'll revisit, and I'm just staying on top really of what we're not doing this year, this semester, that we normally would do within Newsdays. They're really enjoying it. It seems that they're really enjoying it. They are trying. We have different people in different roles each week. And again, like Carol said, it's very much mirroring industry. We're getting them ready for working in a new environment. We're giving them the skills that they need to be working in that environment at the moment. And there are glitches and all. It's not perfect, but neither is it when you turn on the telly and watch news now. You know, we're just seeing it in a different way. And sometimes you can't help it if your interviewee is looking up or looking down, or has got something dreadful in the background and that kind of thing. But it's managing and just talking, you know, seeing what we can do and how we can, as journalists, how they can manage that potentially. But they're enjoying it, and they're getting out and about, and they're doing it, and they're producing content. And I think, like I say, that, you know, the fact that we're sort of preparing them, hopefully as well as we can, for what is this new environment, with an eye to the future, thinking, right, what can we do? Hopefully in semester 2 we'll get into the gallery, but we don't know. So so that's us. We're giving it a go. Fantastic. And I will stop sharing there.
Thank you. That's fantastic overview of what you've been doing at Worcester. And, you know, both you and Carol, and I'm probably going to say this again at the end, and I'm sure our next speakers are going to just reinforce this, which is just the amount of work that staff are doing to enable these things to happen. I feel as if everybody I speak to is just working so hard and at their absolute limits at the moment. And I think, you know, everybody, staff, are to be commended for this as much as students. And I think
if I can just bump in very quickly, Margaret, somebody sharing their screen with emails on at the moment.
Oh yeah, so somebody is sharing their screen with emails on it, but I don't know who it is. Who's still screen sharing? Oh, John Kerry. John, you're sharing your screen. So yeah, good. So we're going to move on now to Kurt Barling from Middlesex. Kurt, welcome. It's lovely to see you.
You too, and everyone else. I'm going to try and use Prezi Video. I'm hoping everyone can see that screen now. Are you sharing my screen with my name on it, Margaret?
No, I don't see. I don't see any. I'm allowing everyone to share their screen, so you should, if you're screen sharing, we should be able to see it. Yeah, it looks like, yeah.
But now you're seeing, what are you seeing? You seeing the whole screen or just?
In the whole screen, so we're seeing your slides.
Yeah, okay.
And we're seeing you too.
Slide shift, you see that?
Well, we can still see you and we can see the slides. So if you're happy with that, I think, yeah.
So this was the challenge for our students this year. Stretch your journalistic creativity, but you're going to have to do it online. Talking about third years, undergrads on the BA Journalism and Comms. And in the first term, they focus on radio, and in the second term and social media, and in the second term they focus traditionally on TV, and then at the end of the final term we'll have a sort of mixed media session where they can choose what they want to deliver. So the big question was, this year, we knew we were going to lockdown, and very early on, Middlesex made the decision that everything would be done online. And in the media department, absolutely everything is done online. We have no students in the university on our course. In fact, we've got them in 6 different countries. So that in and of itself presented a kind of challenge in how we would approach the traditional news days, which like Rachel and Carol, we would have used the news studios, radio and news studios, TV and gallery in normal circumstances. But we decided that actually, even in usual news days, I wouldn't say it's peripheral, it's good to have that experience of working in those environments. But in actual fact, we are very much focused on the editorial requirements of the journalism, and therefore we put an emphasis on the actual journalism rather than the pushing the buttons in the gallery, although they very much enjoy that when they do it. So inevitably we went down the Mojo route as well, being the most realistic approach. Obviously we still want to replicate a newsroom workflow on the day. We still want students to explore a news agenda, but perhaps with a greater emphasis on forward planning, as well as introducing some on-the-day production, and thereby delivering content within a specific window and to a clear deadline. Essentially, our news days run between 11 o'clock. The department made the decision that all online lectures will be delivered at 11 in the morning. So we start at 11 and we run through till 4 o'clock, with occasionally a little bit of overrun to 4:30 to help out students who might have felt they struggled and need a little bit extra feedback at the end of the day. Clearly what we want them to do still, notwithstanding they're not in a gallery, is work under pressure, and particularly technical deadlines. Even with the best will in the world, we still have technical issues. Last week we had a problem with SoundCloud. It went down. Obviously we're using SoundCloud for the audio aspects of their packaging, but SoundCloud went down and we had to find workarounds for that, but they did, and they succeeded. One of the things that both of my colleagues have already mentioned is teamwork. And I feel it's really important that even though we're working remotely, we still work in teams. We have been working on Zoom. And Zoom, of course, gives you the flexibility to work in breakout rooms. So the beginning of the day, in the first meeting of the day, the editorial meeting, if you like, the conference, we have it all together. And then after about 45 minutes of discussion, setting up the day, what we're going to work on in terms of news in brief stories and sports stories, and also going through what the feature stories they've actually done. We then split up into 3 groups, essentially. Group 1 is the news editing team. That's 2 students who, it's on a rotation basis. So next week it'll be 2 different students. So everyone gets to do every role, as it were, across the year. So we have 2 students as news editors, with me, if you like, sitting over that as exec editor, just to double check things moving fluently. We have a breakout room for the news in brief team, where every student in that team has a responsibility for coming up with an on-the-day news story. And then we have a second team in a second breakout room doing sports news, and every student in there has to do on-the-day sports news story. One of the students in either of those breakout teams is selected to be the producer for that team, and the channel is kept open. It's interesting that you were saying on Canvas you weren't able to communicate outside of the window, and it was only a one-way chat, Carol, but on Zoom I keep the channel open for the complete news day, which means that in the breakout rooms they're chatting to each other the whole time, and in the news editing room, where I'm in there with the 2 other students, we're chatting the whole day, and we can pop in and out of those other they both become hosts in the Zoom hosts, so they can pop into and out of those rooms and coordinate with those teams throughout the day. And within the teams, they are specifically instructed to take a partner and you exchange info. They can exchange it obviously on Zoom through the chat function. They can drop a link and they can open it up and read it. And in that way, they have a filter before their work goes to the producer, who has another filter, and then the work goes up to the news editors, which is another filter, and then finally through me, final filter, before it gets published. Everything gets put up into the draft on a Wix site. I'll get to that in a moment. So teamwork is absolutely critical. And I've put a real emphasis on them, saying this is about you taking individual editorial responsibility for your own news features. And we've opted for news features rather than on-the-day news, because we've got students in Morocco, Spain, Portugal, Poland, Czech Republic, and we're very conscious that we couldn't rely on the stability of their broadband connections to do on-the-day news features, and be sure that they got that important training and practice of practicing making programs or making items, news items. So we've opted to send them down the news features route, which they then have to deliver on the day and upload on the day and tweak on the day. What I'd say is that they're still driven by a news agenda. They're news features. They're not, you know, somebody's cat got stuck up a tree. And practically everyone this week did COVID, of course, but it was interesting because it was COVID from Morocco, COVID from Portugal, COVID from actually Poland. They didn't do that. They did the abortion ruling in Poland. But the point is that they're still tuned into a news agenda, but a news feature agenda, which allows them a little bit more scope to be creative. And the collective responsibility, as well, being a producer on those news teams or being a news editor. The one thing that we've found is that we can't just rock up on the day and be, you know, run through the motions with the technical team. The prep, this process is much more front loaded. We've got to make sure that students are up to speed and supported on all the aspects of editorial production, even if they've done the training in the, you know, they've been trained on particular skills in the first and second year. They still need refreshing. They still need to improve the ability to deliver at speed with those with that skill set, be it on Audition or in the after Christmas it will be with Adobe Rush for TV. We need to be aware that this is an evolving process and make it clear to students it's an evolving process. We're not expecting perfection. We're expecting to develop that greater understanding of the production cycle through the year. And that comes obviously, as all of you do, with feedback. But each student has a responsibility for critically monitoring their progression. And so after this last week's program, they've all been tasked during the week with looking at the output of everybody and choosing one particular person above them in the running order to critique their work. And we'll have at the beginning of next week a thorough debrief. Frankly, after 5.5 hours communicating across the continent, the on-the-day debrief, which I usually did, didn't feel appropriate. They were too exhausted by what they had to do. So we'll have it at the beginning of next week, which is not a news day next week. We have a news day the following week, but we'll get a thorough debrief, and they'll get that feedback, both written from their peers, written and in class from me. So prep is really important, much more front loaded. One of the things we needed to make sure we had some asynchronous tools for them. These are just grabs of images of the 4 things we felt were really important: video capture, audio editing. So that's capture with mobile phones. How do you do it? And this is for audio editing, Audition, video capture, which we haven't got to yet, but nevertheless the resource is there for them to look at. Video capture again on mobile phone or an iPad. And finally, Adobe Rush, how to edit using Adobe Rush. So those synchronous tools are there for, resources are there for them to look at whenever they see fit. On top of that, we also have our synchronous when we tune into Zoom. We don't do news days every week. We stretch them out through the term, and we offer them synchronous lectures, but they're also asynchronous because I've recorded them so they can see them. They can see them live and ask me questions, but they can also see them after the event or before the event or whenever they want to, just to feel that they are not missing out on understanding those, if you like, more theoretical ideas which are important for them to be considering when they're actually going through their news days, so they can engage properly in critical reflection. So news values, interviewing, soundscape, script writing, these are all lectures that I give them, but they're there asynchronous and they're also synchronous at the same time. What do we ask students to deliver? Term one, it's really simple. Make it clear to all of them, reinforce the message. These are the elements you need. You need a headline, you need a text introduction, you need a placeholder image, you need a feature, maximum 2 minutes 30. And in term three, that will switch to, this is the news feature element. And there's in the term two, that will change to edited news feature of 2:30. All of this, of course, is ready to be uploaded on the Wix site when we are in the news day. And on the Wix site, for those of you familiar with it, you can place everything in a drafts area, which only then gets published by the 2 news editors that we've chosen to do the work on the day. Both terms, we have this element of on the day news production, because that's obviously the key thing on a news day, is to replicate that on the day sense of panic and excitement, adrenaline rush. And so this year, this term, we've decided to do news in brief, where again, they need to deliver on the day, as well as their news feature, make sure it's all ready and ready to be uploaded and viewed and published. A headline, text story, placeholder image, and if necessary, a clip or some actuality to animate that story. And thirdly, in that team, one of the things I didn't say was that the producer on the individual teams, news and brief teams and sport teams, are also responsible for, at the end of the day, doing a voiceover of all those stories that have been done. So within the teams, they have to discuss who's going to do the voiceover and to share the materials so that the text story can be turned into a voiceover story. That isn't entirely necessary, of course, in terms of an online news day, but we wanted them to practice those skills. So that was a way of getting them to practice the skill. Exactly the same process for sports stories. How do we expect students to deliver? Well, of course, these are the things that all you guys will be telling your students too. You know, we want interesting stories. We want original news gathering. They're not there to, take stuff from other people. It's original. Obviously, we're mindful of the environment. So a lot of that can be gathered online if necessary. I think a student in Portugal wasn't having so many difficulties getting out into the streets. We want strong cues, want strong images, strong headlines, make it news relevant. Just reminding them too, of course, because they're working remotely, that they still need to listen to radio. They still need to listen to other output. They need to be prepared. They need to keep practicing their voice performance. And in order to deliver good quality content, we, if you like, incentivize them this year by creating a pretty good website, actually. You know, it's basic, but it's pretty good. And it's obviously for them in the third year, it's a way for them to also showcase their work, and it incentivizes them, of course, to make sure that the work is the best that they can possibly deliver, if I can put it like that, because otherwise it's only them who's going to look foolish. So we've created documents for them, again, asynchronous documents, protocols for them to follow for that news day in order to get material up onto the Wix site. I always find it useful because it lets me know what I'm expecting to write these protocols for the students. They find it useful, and if the evidence is anything to go by, we have fewer glitches because they're very clear guidelines and very clear protocols for them. I also did a playbook for them, so they understood what their roles were. on the news day, what the news editor is expected to do, what the producer expected to do, what the individual reporters expected to do, and also gave them some a document which gives them the guidelines of what we're just reinforcing the message of what we're expecting, the minimum standard required to deliver broadcast material. Even though we're doing it on a platform and we're not doing it as a live program as we normally do, you still need the same quality of output. As I said, if it's on a website showcasing your work, then it should be better. So the window is 11 till 4. We managed very well to keep within that deadline. As I've said, news features, the big story was coronavirus last week, so most students did coronavirus. We operate within that Zoom environment, and I've found the Zoom environment just very straightforward. I haven't had any issues with it. Of course, I'm not being as ambitious as Worcester is by having students in the studio and out in the ground, and I think Zoom would be more limited in that context. But we've opted for this approach simply because we've got students in too many different places to try and pull that all together. And the university itself has been pretty much locked down, most of it, so we didn't even have staff on site. The result has also been we've established and maintained that editorial chain of responsibility. So I think it was Carol who said that the students, no, actually it was Rachel who said the students weren't used to working together. Well, they have to work together. That's it. And communication, doesn't matter where you are, you need to communicate with each other to make this work. So the result last week was 22 stories published on the day. This was our top story on the COVID vaccine, the extension of the COVID vaccine. There you can see on the left, news in brief stories, with the top item being the news in brief read by one of the students, audio obviously. And I think next term we will also try to do some TV. I've got to work out a way of doing that, but I think that should be possible to do a similar thing with TV reads in effect with a virtual background. But there may be other ways. In fact, some of you talking today have given me some ideas on how else we might achieve that. But nevertheless, we will still use this platform. That's the website, by the way, if you wanted to have a closer look. Of course, with all this, feedback is essential. One of the reasons I opted for the Zoom was because I could keep track across the day and give students feedback during the day. And they can email me, obviously, they can put material, if it's open material, in the chat area. And they can also get critical feedback from their peers during the day as they go through the day, because I've made them into teams. And obviously, next week, they'll get even more feedback. And my experience is the students, they want the feedback, even though sometimes they're a little bit embarrassed by it and you know, they shy away from it. Strangely enough, in this environment, it seems that the students who tended to be quieter are much more vocal. Something about not being in the same room with people and being conscious of those people. And of course, each time we do one of these news days, I'm saying to them, don't rest on your laurels. Set production targets for the next Tuesday. You know, make sure you're up in your game, as it were. So that's it.
Fantastic, thank you, Kurt. Sound really important things, which I think really touch on what some of the others have said, is that notion of teamwork. Something I'm really interested in is actually how staff are also working together to produce these news days. It seems to me that people are doing an awful lot on their own, and I'm wondering if that's the case.
Well, certainly with us, it's me and what we call a graduate teaching assistant. Mm-hmm. So there's just the two of us. The graduate teaching assistant is in Poland, and obviously I'm in London. Mm-hmm. So it's just the two of us. We run that. We prep the news day. We run the news day. We get the feedback on the news day. That's it. There's nobody else involved. Mm-hmm.
Which is pretty impressive, I think, and that's probably the case for most colleagues. They're doing it either on their own or with one other person, and that it's pretty impressive the amount of stuff that that people are doing. We have some questions coming up in the chat, but I think what we'll do is maybe just keep them until the end, and then we can have a discussion with people just chipping in, if that's okay. Can I go now to, and we have a double act now from Falmouth, and we have Kevin and we have Steve who are going to tell us what they've been doing since they started running remote news days a way back in March, which seems like an awfully long time ago. So Steve and Kevin, please, you have the floor.
It's more primarily Kevin, because I've not been teaching on that module, Margaret. So Kevin has, and I think he's there too.
Yes, I'm here. Hiya.
Yep.
So no pressure, Kevin. It's all on your shoulders.
It's all on my shoulders.
I can chip in.
I think Steve's going to add some thoughts about remote teaching in general as well as we go through. So hi everybody, I'm Kevin Bishop, and I'm a lecturer here at Falmouth University. I'm just going to share my screen. And can you see that now?
Can't see the share yet, Kevin, just you.
Okay, 1 second, share.
There we go. Yeah.
And present. So yeah, as I said, I'm Kevin Bishop, and this is a look at our COVID secure news days at Falmouth University. In another life, beforehand, our news days were multimedia with, and a lot of what I'm going to say obviously is going to echo what other people have said. Multimedia with a radio and TV bulletin, which we produced at 3 o'clock and 3:30 respectively, and also online content to reflect everything that was being done on radio or TV. We've got about 30 students in each of the second and third years. As I said, each news story was turned into a text team, and social media teams are also promoting the stories and also promoting us as journalists producing those stories. The bulletins were broadcast live into the newsroom via YouTube, so students got to watch their output, listen to their output as well immediately. And everything we did from the planning meeting right through to the feedback meeting after the news day was all done in the newsroom. Some of the issues that we had, which I'm going to sort of address at the end again, we struggle with story idea generation. I don't know if it's a particular problem being done here in Cornwall, but very often we come to a planning meeting and students just did not have ideas, or their ideas were just far too big. They were topics. They were, I'm doing a story this week about mental health or Brexit, without coming to us and telling us what actual stories they were doing. A lot of students still very hesitant to reach out to people, to actually go to communities and talk to people for their stories. For the technical news days, for TV and radio, we had some trouble getting students who weren't, at least didn't think they were interested in TV and radio to engage. They would often resort to doing the text rather than the TV or radio, and it's quite difficult to encourage them to actually do TV or radio. I struggle all the time to get people to think like they were journalists. They would think like they were journalists often during the news day, but I really wanted them to think all week long, I'm a journalist, I'm walking down the street, there's a story over there, or I'm flicking through my Twitter feed, or I'm just talking to people in the pub or wherever, and there's a story there. That sense of being a journalist at all times is something I was struggling to get across. Attendance, like most of us, attendance was hit and miss. It was generally okay, but was really only hitting about 70–75% most of the term, I'd guess. I used to find, because I ran the news days on my own with a brilliant technician, that both myself and the students would often find it difficult to focus. If we were doing TV and radio and online and social media all at the same time, I'd be flitting between a 800-word text article and then a 2-minute video and then a podcast and the headlines and then the technical problems. And I found it very difficult to focus on one because I was always being dragged to something else and putting out fires. I think the students also found that kind of side of things was quite difficult to cope with at times. And then ownership and reflection of the final product was also difficult, I think, at times. Once again, that sense that the news day was over and they moved on to the next lecture, the next subject. So this year, for our second years, I'm talking about how we work with second years and then into third years as they are now. We had 2 weeks of preparation for news days, and then 3 real news days this year, and then lockdown, COVID hit, and everybody went home. But just about the same time, the local community radio station called Source FM approached us. not for a paint job, as I think they need, but also they just wanted to know if we could help with some reporting. So during the first period of lockdown, so in April and through to the end of term in May, we produced a daily program for them. So a good news story morning program, which was 5 shows a week, a weekend compilation. Students edited, curated, and I compiled the program. It was automated in the sense that they just sent in a recorded audio report. It was then put into the radio studio's automated system and broadcast with jingles and connecting promos and stuff like that. But they could use this material for assessment. And we got a real sort of stretch of local stories. You know, a lot of profiling people who were making masks and PPE, acquirement schemes, food deliveries. Some students used this time to sort of reflect. One guy ran through Falmouth and just described what the empty town was like as he did on his daily run. There was quite a few online events that we covered. We interviewed the MP, we looked at local sports clubs, we had advice sessions about how to deal with various issues, and a lovely story about a lady who went every day to the headland up here to feed a robin that used to come and perch on her car. And she was worried that no one was going to feed the robin anymore. So we sent one of our students up there to find the robin, which was one of those lovely little community stories that only local radio can do, but it was just lovely. But I needed to move that on to, and it got well received, quite a lot of coverage in the local press, students around the country working at home and providing positive stories for our local community radio station. But we had to obviously move on to this semester, and I tried to just sort of think about how we would run Newsdays when being remote. And the model I took was what we did for last year's election program. So this is the election night last year, when we had a newsroom team. We had the guys on the top right there in the newsroom. We had a field team and we had a tech team. And throughout the night on election night, we produced a bulletin every half hour with summaries on the bottom of the hour to the local student radio station. But I decided that we'd run with Source FM, our local community station. And as many others have said, I wanted to mirror industry. We were allowed to be blended. So I decided that we would have a online planning meeting every Monday, an hour Zoom, a Teams chat when we'd all come with our ideas. The news editor would run it, getting a general idea of what stories were in the mix, how reliable those stories were, whether we actually thought they were doable, and specifically from my point of view, what would be involved. Between Monday and Thursday, students were encouraged to actually gather those stories, to record them. And then we moved to a 9 o'clock online morning meeting on Newsday itself, when we then honed down those stories and made sure that they were there, that they were what we expected that they would be, or if they were they still worth airing. And that's when we got down to the nitty gritty of timings, with the news editor deciding exactly how long each story would be. And then we'd run the Newsday in the newsroom from 1 o'clock. I'll go on a bit more about this in a minute, but our newsroom is 50% capacity, in fact, less than 50% capacity. So only half of the students would be in the newsroom. We moved across to a 4 o'clock recording of our bulletin. So it was an hour-long bulletin, which we record as live in our radio studio, which you can see on the screen there, with Ivor, our technician. Ivor's a radio whiz kid, so he does a lot of the help on that. After the recording, which inevitably has the occasional sort of false starts and one or two little bits I need to edit out, I edit that at home. Normally takes about an hour on a Thursday evening, and it's broadcast live on Source FM. Sorry, it's broadcast on Source FM at 8 o'clock on a Friday morning. So as I said, we had 40% capacity in the newsroom and our studios, so only 3 people allowed in the studio. We have to wear masks at all time, obviously observe social distancing. As someone else said, the equipment goes into quarantine, and we use mic shields on all the microphones. I've found also that most students now are using their own equipment rather than the stuff that we supply, just because of the difficulty of getting it, accessing it. As I said before, it's radio and online only. We use OBS to drive the radio program, OneDrive for the source material, Audition to edit, and any external material they want, they get from Burley. The team that is on campus is the purely production team and the social media team. And these teams are rotated every week. You're either a producer, social media, or you're out in the field or at home being a reporter. We use Zoom for most of our interviews, Teams, and Anchor FM as well. Anchor FM is another bit like Clean Feed, another means of interviewing remotely. I find Zoom really useful. One of the main things I like about Zoom is that you can tick a box to have both ends of the recording saved locally. So it gets rid of some of the interference from the call itself. And then it sends you the individual tracks, both yourself and your interviewee, straight to your downloads folder, which is really, really useful. I gave the students the task of coming up with the concept of the program. It was all to them to decide who our audience was, what they wanted the program to sound like, what they wanted its feel to be. They had a poll and came up with the name of Farmer Soundwaves, designed the logo, and also designed the feel of it, which they decided they wanted 2 presenters. I encouraged them, and they ran with this, to each presenter brings in a piece of music each week, and kind of Desert Island Disc style, they give us a little bit of a story as to why they like that piece of music, and then play it. We've had 9 shows to date. In fact, no, the 9th show is tomorrow. We've put out over 90 stories so far. And I think I'm right in saying that all students have rotated through one of the roles. They've all been a reporter, they've all been a presenter, they've all worked as a newsroom producer. The newsroom producers reflect what happens in industry. They sit in the newsroom, they take in the material, they write the cue, they make sure that the file gets to the output machine on time. We have a rundown sub who's solely in charge of making sure all of the furniture of the rundown is correct, that every page has got the right instructions, and that we've got enough promos and stabs and outros and so on and so forth. And then we have a technician and a social media team. And yeah, it's, as I said, we've had 9 shows so far. I was a little bit hesitant at the start about wearing masks. I was just worried about the sound quality. It is a little bit of an issue, but we can't really get around that. And it's the students are coping very well with it. We're engaging quite well with the Source FM audience through TikTok, Facebook and Twitter, of course, and Instagram is by far our biggest provider of engagement with the audience. One of the things I've done as well is to help with the kind of peer review. I've created a forum for discussion of issues, which normally is one of those things that I put down for assessment, and they normally end up filling it in all in the last 2 days. But this one has been pinging like mad. I've been really, really impressed by how much they've engaged with it. Most students, I'd say, have put down more comments on each other's work than they're required to do for assessment. A lot of interaction, people asking, how do you do this? Anyone got any tips for interviewing? Anyone got any tips for recording? That kind of stuff. And it's really sort of very lively and a very useful part of the module. And the feedback has been good. In fact, the feedback has been better than I could have ever hoped for. Really, really pleased with what is coming back to me from the students about how they feel they've been engaging this semester. So our pros and cons. The downsides, I'd say, and most of these are common to other people, but oh yeah, the first downside was that 10 minutes before we did our first news day, the internet went down across the whole university, which threw up a few problems, but we coped. We did everything using 4G and it worked. I think the lack of video this term has been a problem. I've made it an optional assessment that they can make a piece of video, but they're obviously not doing it week by week. And I think that will start to tell next semester, that the fact they haven't done much video this year. And, as we said before, the shooting of sequences and stuff like that is something they just don't have a lot of practice in at the moment. They're not doing the kind of face-to-face interviews and the kind of news gathering we would like them to do by getting out and talking to people. That's obvious, but I'd say they are trying when they can. One guy last week managed to one of our local care homes is one of the pilot schemes for the new testing system for relatives to be able to get tested before they can go and see residents of a care home. And he went and became the guinea pig for their testing system and recorded what I thought was actually a really lovely recording of himself getting tested and then walking back to his car and getting the result. So they're doing some of it, but not quite enough. I think pastoral care is a problem. You know, obviously when you're all in one room, you spot that person at the back of the room who's gone quiet. You do get a sense of who is on form and who's not quite on form at the moment, and you can talk to them quietly afterwards. That doesn't happen as much. And as other people have said, I miss the spontaneous learning and the teaching and that spontaneous feedback. I miss those moments when, as a lecturer, I learned something from a student, really. And I miss being able to just lean over someone's shoulder and just point and say, have you thought about putting that over there? Which is something you can't do, obviously, as much. But the plus sides, the what's working well, the story idea generation. Every week so far, I've had about 17 to 20 minutes more material offered than I could have put in the hour-long bulletin. Every week we've had about 17 story offers, and we regularly run about 9 to 10. So we've had every week more stories, and I've got enough material now from that's left over and has been dropped for a Christmas show, and they're getting used to being dropped, which is good for them, I think. You know, coming up with a good story and until it's not being run this week, I think is quite good. The outreach to the community is good. Linking up with Source FM gives us that kind of ability to say we're working for Source FM, the community radio station, rather than we are a student publication. I'm finding that is actually empowering students to approach people a lot more, and we're getting, I think, a lot more response because of it. I believe we're interviewing the Tim Schmidt this afternoon, the guy behind the Eden Project, which is something I don't think would have happened recently, up until now. The non-technically minded students are really engaging with it, and I'm just bowled over by how many people have got into the radio studio to be the technician and have come up asking me is there a job in being a studio manager in broadcast. They seem to love that role. And more students are becoming all-week journalists. I'm finding students are messaging me on a Sunday afternoon asking, is this the story? Could I cover this for next week? Which I'm really pleased about. And the majority, I'd say, of our stories are actually finished by mid-morning on the Newsday, which definitely wasn't happening last year. As other people have said, we're getting nearly 100% attendance at Newsdays. And I've said before, our forum is really active. And I just think that students are feeling they're learning a lot more at the moment, and they're getting more in-depth production and reporting skills in radio, not in the other areas that we want to teach. But I'm finding it much easier to keep across the bulletin than I used to, because we're focused on one bulletin, and I can spend a lot more time looking at the cues and the headlines and working with the students on making them better than I did before. And the ownership of the final product, we go out at 8 o'clock on a Friday morning, and I'm on a Facebook chat group with the students, and it starts pinging at 8 o'clock in the morning because they're listening to it and they're interacting with it. And I just find that something that wouldn't happen so much before. And that's it for me. Steve.
No, I was just going to ask, because I'll stay on topic, Kevin, why do you think the forum what have you done to the forum to make it so interactive? And do they share story ideas through the forum? Yeah, they're sharing story ideas. I don't know, I put out 1 or 2 topics that I asked them to comment on. And it's assessed, so they have to write 20 comments. Okay, that's probably what it is. Actually, I have other things that, they are being assessed on it, but some of them are really running away with it and reacting to each other and coming up with suggestions and so on and so forth. Cool. I've got to teach this next year, so it's really good to hear from all of you today about challenges you've had. But yeah, it's working really well. Thank you, Kevin. I'll go back to you, Margaret.
Great, thank you. Fantastic. That was really interesting. Kevin, really interesting points I think everybody else is bringing up, and that says the peer-to-peer learning that's happening as well, and the fact that the students are maybe in some respects learning more from each other than they might have done necessarily in the classroom, which is a real positive. Thank you everyone who has presented today. We have a short video that Jeffrey Davis from Westminster has asked us to share. I think he might be on the call, but he might not, I'm not sure, because I know he's in class this afternoon, so I think he's having to nip in and out. So I'm going to do my best to share this, and fingers crossed it actually works. So let's see if this happens, and I very much hope it does.
Good afternoon. My name is Jeffrey Davis. I'm a principal lecturer at the University of Westminster, and I teach television journalism, both documentary and news. I'm really sorry I can't be with you for this AJE meeting on online learning, because actually I'm teaching an online television news course at the moment, which is why I can't be here in person. So I'm going to talk a bit about what we learned early on from online teaching for news, and also show you how we're currently doing it with the master's group that I'm teaching at the moment. So we went into lockdown about a week ahead of the country at the University of Westminster in mid-March. And for the next couple of weeks, I was still teaching TV newsroom to a second-year BA class. That went okay. They were producing material mainly on their phones, doing online interviews, as indeed the broadcasters are. And initially what I got them to do was to send in the scripts, and then I put those up on screen to introduce the stories.
Today is the 19th day of official quarantine, but I've been self-isolating for about 23 days now. It is supposed to end next Friday, April 9th, but I'm sure it will last longer than that. The situation now is very delicate because the number they told us today is that we are over 10,000 deaths, which means Spain now is the second country in the world in number of deaths, just behind Italy.
We did some assessment work after the Easter vacation, and for that it was decided, for a number of reasons, that we would change the format. It was not possible to do newsroom, so we asked the students to submit either audio or video as a part of their submissions, and that was posted onto a website. This had a number of interesting issues. We had students, some in Hong Kong, some as far away as Florida, across Europe, north of England, as well as those who were still in London. What we got from that, which was really interesting, was the use of Blackboard Ultra. Using the Collaborate mechanism, we kept an audio circuit open all day, and that allowed us to communicate, and students would then email in questions or whatever, or I was sitting where I am now, listening to their questions and helping them out, and looking at videos that they'd submit and making suggestions on how they might re-edit as necessary. When we got to September, the university had worked very hard over the summer to disinfect everywhere, one-way corridors, room limits on the number of people in each room, and so on. And we had 24 students taking the MA broadcast course, some of whom actually are still abroad in India and China, which meant that they were going to be online whether they wanted to be or not. The university only allowed us to have 2 days a week on campus for the course itself, which meant that only one of the 2 days I would normally teach television news would be available in campus. The other day had to be online, so I had to work that way. Again, what we did was to use Collaborate as a way of running an audio circuit. I'd start at 9 in the morning because there seemed no reason if people were based at home that they shouldn't start earlier, and also to consideration for those who are in different time zones. So we'd have a morning conference at 9 o'clock, and then we did a bulletin at midday and one at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The first one about 6 to 8 minutes, the second one about 14, 15 minutes. We also have Rundown Creator, which has been a fantastic tool for this, because of course it does a lot of the setting up for the program in the technical sense, which I'll come on to, but also that it means that the students can all write their scripts and I can see them all from wherever they are. It's a cloud-based system, and I'm very much a fan of it. What we use then as the core of our programming to set it up is Blackboard, and Rundown Creator. Students can see the running order and input their scripts into Rundown Creator, and they then send a link to any material they've created in video or pictures through to the studio. So this is a shot of the studio. We're using a NewTek TriCaster, and we have a technician. One technician manages this, it's Craig, and he would be taking in the audio and video that students are sending, any pictures, setting up the running order. And if the presenter is actually in the studio, he'll be setting that up as well. We have a green screen studio with variable backgrounds. And you can see here it's not a very large space, but it's more than adequate when the presenter is actually in the studio. So students send their material in to the director. As you can see there on the right, you've got the URLs for the items that they've created, which they load on their Google Drive. And here you can see a list that Craig has created, which allows him to see these items as they come in and confirm that they're actually there on the script ready to be used. We take the teleprompter format from Rundown Creator. We feed that through Blackboard to the presenter, wherever they are, beam them in on Skype into a virtual background, and play out to YouTube.
Good afternoon, this is Labib Ziad, and these are the afternoon headlines. 5 Labour councillors have resigned from the party in protest at what they describe as the party's move rightward under Keir Starmer.
When it comes to the debrief, if I can't do it in person, I play the YouTube recording back over Blackboard so everybody can see it. Where it's not possible to do that, we upload the recording to Panopto, and then actually I write the comments against the script in the side column, which allows the students wherever they are to see it. I hope this has been helpful, and thank you for watching.
Thank you. I'm not sure if we still have Jeffrey on the call, or if he's gone. We have a number of questions in the chat, so I think this is probably where I'm going to shift all the responsibility over to Deborah to see if she's picked up on anything specific, or indeed if anybody just wants to pitch in, please feel free to do so.
What people have been doing in some cases is responding to some of the questions in the live chat as we've been going on, which has been great. I think everybody's found all the presentations absolutely fascinating, really interesting, and lots of aspects we can pick up. Just starting to scroll backwards, and if anybody does want to sort of interrupt, please do just open up your microphone and jump in. There was Kate Heathman was saying, is anybody doing a text stroke online publication as well as broadcast online? Does anybody want to jump in on that one?
I guess I could. I don't do broadcast. All our work is aimed at this website, which has podcasts, it has stories, it has video. I don't know if Kate had a question about an online publication particularly.
No, I just wondered because it's just that I'm at LJMU and we've split our final year into a multimedia team, and part of that is working on the digital team, part work radio and TV, and then another team working on a weekly news magazine, a feature-led magazine. And I just wondered if anyone was doing that because we're doing remote design days. So students designing pages at home. I was just interested if people were using different things to do that, really. But I think Carol, your talk at the beginning was pretty similar to how we run our magazine days, although we do have a production team in university as well as working at home. But all our writers are at home. They all work remotely. If they're a writer that week for the magazine, they're all working remotely.
Yeah. Well, what I probably didn't explain, because this has always happened even pre-COVID, is a lot of our third years take editorial roles. So there is an editor, there's a social media editor, a video editor, a picture editor, and the second years are their deputies. And then,
oh, that's interesting.
And then step up. So separate from the Newsdays, they have their own conference once a week, which I deliberately don't go to. where they also take responsibility in that way.
Yes.
But they're doing their production and their InDesign classes on campus.
Right.
Because the module leader for that thought that was more useful.
Yes. Yeah, we try and do a production day on campus, but we have our university was quite, I think JMU put quite a lot of money into giving students access to the software that they needed so they can get InDesign at home. But of course there are issues sometimes with their own laptops and PCs. But anyway, that's interesting. Thank you.
I think the problem mostly for us is we've paid for all our students to have InDesign and all the Outlook and Office 365, but they've often got parents working from home and the bandwidth on the emails, or there's a younger sibling running around crying. So yeah, it's not ideal, is it?
And we can't assume that all our students have got great laptops and great PCs, because they just haven't. We've got one student who's managed to do everything just from her phone, apart from she's been able to come in when she's been able to come in. But I think that, there's that financial implication, I think, although we did have a system early days where students could ask for support if they needed a laptop, that was actually means tested. And I'm not sure if it was means tested or not, because I know there were debates about it, but I'm sure other universities are in this position where there are students who are disenfranchised by not having great kit. And that's something that I think that's why we've carried on with a mix of remote and on campus as much as we can.
Yeah, I think I would agree. I think we probably have all experienced the students who are quite challenged by the ability to create content in the way we might expect if they were on campus, but they just can't do at home. So again, this I think was something that we talked about the last time we gathered. That issue of digital poverty is a very real one for a lot of our students. Fiona O'Brien at Kingston's asking what I think is a good question, and it's one that I'm also particularly interested in, which is at Kingston we're going to be doing print and design days next term. Can anybody offer any tips? I'm going to be running a magazine journalism module next term remotely, so I'm particularly interested in any good advice if anybody's doing that already.
Just to add, so I've been teaching level 5 this term. I've been teaching InDesign entirely remotely, which has been a bit of an experiment and has worked actually really well. So what I did, I looked at various options. We've got like a LinkedIn Learning subscription. I was looking at those, but it's all, even though it's quite a good sort of how-to video, it just wasn't geared towards students particularly. So I ended up just using Loom, just making lots and lots. It was very time consuming, but of very short step-by-step videos. And actually what I've come to the conclusion, I'm going to use it when we're back on campus next year as an extra, as a backup. So for students who miss or, whatever classes, it's actually worked. These are for students who've never done any InDesign and are literally opening it for the first time. The university, again, like all of you seem to be saying, has paid for licenses for them. But I was really pleasantly surprised that they're able to follow it. And it's really, based step 1, do this, now go back, they read it, they watch the video, then they go and try it. And I have like a troubleshooting place where if something goes wrong, I can very quickly respond to them. And I sort of had visions of it being a disaster, but actually it's worked very well. So next term, the challenge is going to be with a different group. Actually, usually we'd get them in, they have a print night, they have a press night, and we stay, as late as it takes to do all the layouts and everything. And that's going to be remote. And I'm wondering how with layouts to recreate some of that feeling. And, usually you'd be hanging over their shoulder and helping them with stuff. And because we can't do that, I've decided that campus isn't the way forward for a variety of reasons. So yeah, any tips of anyone who's got experience of doing that kind of thing? How can it work and still feel the same or feel similar?
Yeah, Kate, you put your hand up there. Have you got some experience to share?
Yeah, well, just a few things. I don't know if, please forgive me if you know all about this, but I didn't until this year. The share for review option on InDesign has been brilliant for us because it means that it basically generates a web link of your InDesign page, which they can then email to a tutor and we can look at it. So that's been helpful because we have 50% capacity newsrooms. We have socially distanced designers, but like you say, we don't stand behind them saying, can you move this line, can you move that? So we call up their pages and we actually talk across the newsroom, or we call up their pages and we talk on Teams when they're working at home. We'll say, oh, thanks, can you do this, can you do that? So that's helped massively, the share for review. And I think in terms of sort of generating that buzz, we just, it is really hard, but most of the time we've had, as I say, a mix of on campus and at home. And when we have people working from home, we just get them joined in, just keeping teams up and running in the Newsday. And sometimes they will phone, one designer will phone another designer, and we'll do it on FaceTime, and we'll kind of say, this is what we're doing. So it's been quite tricky. I never thought we'd manage InDesign remotely in terms of and all the content. But as I said earlier, our content is produced on a Monday. We do a production day then on a Tuesday. So we split that. So I don't know if that's helpful, but that's been our experience.
Yeah, really helpful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. No, that has been really helpful, Kate. Thank you. Anybody else get any other questions or anything else in the chat that we perhaps haven't picked up on?
I'm a bit jealous of
yeah, on your
I was a bit jealous of some of my colleagues, like Kevin down in Falmouth, who were getting access to local radio stations in London. It's really tricky to get that kind of access to help our students feel that real world experience. So it's great. And some of the stories you're doing down there, Kevin, seems absolutely fantastic. One thing I've noticed this year is how students, we have to give them more agency and they have to take more responsibility. And actually, that's a very positive thing that's come out for me of lockdown and having to go online. Not everything's perfect by any means. I look forward to get back into the newsroom, but there are some real positive benefits of what's happened in terms of encouraging students. We're all reporting that students are showing up. 100%. I never had 100% turnout before this lockdown period. So something's happening, which in a strange sort of way, we can't let it go back to how it was. We've got to take those positives with us in order that we get this level of engagement. And, it shows that students are actually pretty flexible in adapting to new circumstances. And I think we should all be encouraged by that.
One thing I wanted to say about Source FM, though, is the local community radio station. It has been brilliant for engagement, but they are now coming back to us and asking us to pay for it, pay for the access time.
Whoa.
It's £1,000, which for us is quite a lot of money out of our central budget. And at the moment, I don't know if we can continue it next semester because of that. So it's difficult, but yeah, you're right. It's been great for engagement.
If I may jump in there, I mean, I've been working at Nottingham Trent University for the past year and a bit, but prior to that, I set up journalism at Lincoln, and we went about applying for and putting together a bid for a community radio station actually on the campus. One of very few universities around the country that have actually done that. I think at the time I did the research, there was only about 5 or 6 of us that had actually done that. It's worth doing because, as was said earlier, having your students being able to go out and say, I'm reporting for Siren FM instead of I'm a student journalist, does actually help them open doors a little bit quicker. You're absolutely right.
Good point, Deborah. Something that you particularly mentioned, Kevin, and that something I've been thinking about quite a bit is how we feel, or do we feel that we're building their confidence better in this new way in which we're teaching, or not?
I definitely am seeing more confidence come back at me. I'm definitely seeing more students willing to go an extra mile to do a story. Maybe it's because they've got more time on their hands. Maybe it's because, I don't know, there's something about that kind of the newsroom atmosphere when everyone's sort of watching each other and there's a lot of other distractions. But I definitely feel more confidence there. I mean, what one student, agreed after I suggested that she's doing a story about swimmers and cold swimmers. I suggested, well, I need you to get into the water yourself. And I didn't think she would, but of course she did. And it made for much better radio. So, and I think it's a combination of things.
Mm-hmm. What does anybody else feel that their students have, taken more chances, or just been a wee bit braver in terms of actually getting on the phone to speak to people, because probably most of us are getting more used to just communicating this way now?
I think certainly my students are more happy talking on the phone when they're in their own homes and the other students aren't listening in and I can't hear them.
Definitely.
And that, I think that's what's given them the confidence. I think one of my student feedback was they love having conference together, but then I've got minimal distraction. I'm just getting on with my news day and doing my thing, and Carol's not hovering over me all the time, or other students.
No, I think everybody did make that point, you know, and one of the things that I'm certainly missing is the fact that, you know, I can't wander around a room and look over people's shoulders. And it actually is quite challenging even to do that meaningfully remotely in some respects, although I feel as if I've learned today some ways in which I probably could be doing that. But do we feel as if that, you know, that's something we as educators can learn about the way in which that we are, you know, given the feedback we would give in that way, and that maybe the students are responding to different methods of giving feedback? Anybody feel as if this is a better way to do it?
Hello, so I'm Nathan from the University of Northampton.
Hi, Nathan.
Hi, I normally do the video journalism for first years, and I run the news days. And I find that it's a combination of both, really, because some students definitely need more face-to-face guidance to help build their confidence. So, you know, you find that if they're online, some of them tend to shy away from actually getting involved. But by being there in person, you can actually, you know, give them that confidence by guiding them through the processes, giving them some of those skills that they can't really develop online in terms of production skills, you know, developing those craft skills. And I think it's very important that we don't forget that, you know, that development of skills is still important in face-to-face delivery. And I think that's where we've continued to deliver news days face-to-face. And only those who are isolating, we still have an online kind of platform open through Collaborate and also WebEx, just depending on, you know, what works best with the technology on the day. But I think it's very important that sometimes some students, not all, prefer that face-to-face just to build the confidence and also to guide them through where they're going wrong. Because once they're away, you know, behind the screen, some of them, again, do not tend to engage effectively with whatever you're doing on the day. So we still feel that it's important to have that face-to-face where possible.
I mean, I think the face-to-face is something that, you know, most of us would love to be doing. But certainly I know for us here in our university, and I know two of my colleagues are on the call, we basically have such tight restrictions that most of our students could not travel to campus at the moment because of the restrictions that we have in Glasgow and the west of Scotland at the moment. So it is very much the case of, you know, trying to make the best of that situation and hoping that, you know, that might change after Christmas. But actually, I think that's more hope than expectation. I don't think Glasgow will come out of the top tiers a restriction for quite a long time. So, you know, I think for us that'll continue to be a challenge. Can I just ask if there's anybody, you know, on the call who hasn't spoken, but who is doing something a wee bit different, or has discovered something really useful that they could share with us? Because I think, I mean, it certainly seems that lots of people are taking different approaches, but also similar approaches. And judging by what we've seen today, producing some fantastic outputs. The floor is over to you guys, if anybody's got anything they want to share. Or are we being unnaturally reticent this afternoon?
Can I say something?
Yeah, of course.
Sorry, I switched my. I work at Northampton as well with Nathan, and we did an American election special night around a couple of weeks ago around the US election, And one of the things I found is I think Kurt's right. Kurt Barling, insofar as he says, I think that what this has done has actually encouraged some students to be more ambitious. And we found that they were, they didn't think twice about Skyping to the other side of the world, the other side of the Atlantic, to get American students and American experts talking on the programs that we produced that night. And I think in that way there is a positive element of it. And also, I don't think this is going to be something, I'm sure that you've explored this earlier, and unfortunately I wasn't here in the first hour, but I'm sure this is going to be something that we look back on and say that's when we learned how to do this. Because there's no doubt that if we look at our professional colleagues in the industry, that nobody thinks twice now of having Skype, whereas as an interview, whereas 5 or 6 years ago we would have poo-pooed it as poor quality. And nobody thinks twice about looking at a television package with loads of Skype and people talking from their living rooms as well within the package, which again, we would have poo-pooed, I think, just 6 or 7 years ago as pretty poor telly, to be honest. So I do think the students are embracing this, and we've been trying to explain to them, as I say, Nathan says we do our news days face to face, and that's the only contact that they have. I think that we're trying to tell them, look, you're going to need to use this because newsrooms are going to get smaller, newspapers are going to get smaller, and they're going to you're going to be working probably often remotely at least once or twice a week. I don't know what other people think about that, but this is sort of has brought on the process a lot faster than any of us could have imagined. But I think in that way there will be a positive thing, and they are reacting. I see them being a little bit more ambitious, whereas I have to say, in the 5 years I've been involved in this, getting a student to pick the phone up rather than pick up a quote from Twitter has often been the biggest challenge. And I think we've sort of used this to get over that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that has been a huge positive in terms of the opportunity. I mean, I see that Nathan has put in the chat, this is an opportunity to think outside the box. And, I was talking to my students a few weeks ago and I said, the box actually has just been smashed. So it's almost like we can start doing things completely differently and explore new things in a way that we possibly didn't feel we had permission to do in the past because we were having to meet certain expectations. So I think there's lots of opportunity. And I notice Hilary from Northampton, Hilary, you've shared your US election coverage. So if people want to have a look at that, and I do apologise for not including that at the start of the presentations. So many people covered the presidential elections, and I think there were some stunning examples of the really fantastic work the students were doing. We're almost at 4 o'clock. Can I just thank our speakers, Rachel, Carol, Kurt, Steve and Kevin, and also Jeffrey, who sent in his film, which was great and is possibly one of the ways forward. I hope that everybody has had the opportunity to learn something. I think we probably all have. Certainly got about 5 or 6 pages of notes here that I will be taking forward and possibly following up with some colleagues after the meeting. I think that, in closing, as well as thanking our speakers, I just think we need to, recognise ourselves as peers, the enormously important work that everybody's doing. I'm impressed and I'm worried in equal measure that we have so many people. I think we've almost got a potential shadow pandemic of work-related stress. If it's not happening already, it's possibly about to happen quite soon, and that greatly concerns me because it seems as if people are really working above and beyond, and I think that we need to think about that as well. And I would also just like to say to people that And somebody mentioned pastoral care, and if I can say anything, it is, you know, we need to look after ourselves as well. And everybody keeps saying that, and often I don't see lots of evidence of us doing that. We're just really great at telling each other that. So if you need somebody to tell you that, then I'm going to tell everybody that. Because I'm really struck by colleagues across the country who communicate with me through AJE. It's just that people are working at absolute full tilt. And there is some concern, as well as lots of admiration for the job that people are doing. Thank you also for supporting the AJE in the way that you do, and because this event really only happened because people asked us to do it, and lots of people have contributed and attended, and it's been great to see so many new faces, and hopefully we will we'll see you back again. Our next event is on the 4th of December, and it's a very truncated version of our annual conference, which we have had to put off several times this year, and also a very short AGM. So it's 10:30 on next Friday morning. So if you can join us, some of our colleagues will be presenting their research. If there is anybody here who did put papers in for the annual conference and they were accepted, then we will run another truncated version of our annual conference, probably in late January, because we're very conscious that people do want to share their research too, and we want to enable you to do that. So we will do that at the end of January. And I very much hope, with lots of the positive news about the vaccines, that we will be able to meet in person together at some point in 2021, probably towards the end of 2021. But I think that, you know, looking forward positively, we'll be able to do that, because certainly I know that that's something the committee would love to do. And I know that it's something that lots of people who are members would want to do too. And we would very much look forward to hosting something like that. So thanks again to our speakers. Thanks again to our students, because I think, you know, they're the ones that are producing the content, and it was obvious from our speakers today that there's some great work going on there, and I'm sure lots of students are going to get great rewards when their work gets assessed this year. So thank you so much. Have a good afternoon. It's been great to see people. Please keep in touch. Please use the AJE to communicate with each other. That's why we exist. And if you are not joining us, and I feel it's ridiculous to be talking about Christmas while we're still in November, have a good break, because I think if you're like lots of us, you're really looking forward to having a break over the festive season. So have a good holiday. If you get the chance to have some holiday, please do. And we will look forward to welcoming you back to future events. And can also just thank Deborah Wilson-David from the AJE committee, who helped me out today on the chat. Thanks so much, everyone.